Stop the music now. Oh, hello everybody. Well, I am ready to print now. This is video number 4 of my color reductive relief printing from home video series, and we are ready to print. All right, to be ready to print, make sure you have all your paper cut to size. All right, every piece of paper you're going to print, because remember, this is a color reductive print. So when you carve away after you print the first color, you're going to carve away at the block again, and you'll never get to return. So you got to print all the entire edition. All right. Which case I'm doing 6 of them. I've got 6 pieces of paper here. This is Reves lightweight paper. I want to do it more of a traditional Western style print. I also have a couple of sheets of Japanese paper too to show you what that looks like. Whoa, wait a minute. Here, this isn't the same block I was working with before. This is actually a different block. I want to put a background pattern in my print. All right. This is the pattern I want to use. So I'm using a separate block. And right here, this is a registrations block right here. So I made this registration block out of 1/2-inch plywood with a very, very thin sheet, 1/8-inch plywood on top of it. The reason I used 1/8 inch, because that was about the thickness of the linoleum block right here. And so you can see its rise to that occasion. Yeah. So I made it the same thickness or as the linoleum block, so it's a good layout for registration. All right. What this is used for is to actually show you where to place your paper on the block itself once you ink the block up. All right, and so what you need to do is you need to, I've been using this for years. It's called pin registration, where I take these 2 push pins and I use that to register the paper. Now how I do it is I take all the sheets of paper I'm going to print and I stack them on my block. I also drew lines here. These are guidelines that I drew in pencil with a ruler that make it 1 inch, because I have a 1-inch border on my print. Basically, it's the block, or the matrix, which is the linoleum here, that is 8 by 10 inches. The paper itself is 10 by 12 inches. All right, so it should have a 1-inch border on it. So I have this set up so when I print them, I will have a 1-inch border on the actual paper, around the paper. All right, so I have all my paper together. It's all torn to size. I would talk about that in a later video, prepping paper, but my students already know how to do that. All right, so I have them all stacked together, and I'm going to line them up directly to these lines right here, and I'm going to push in my pin. Now previously I made marks on the board here where I want to put my pins. All right, 1/4 inch inside the paper, edge of the paper, and I have little arrows there so I can see it once I lay the paper down over top. I had already started the first one here, so I'm going to carefully stick that one all the way through all sheets of my paper. Hopefully none of them had shifted. And I'm going to push that pin right into that hole. Find that hole right there. That's just what we want to do. And then I keep the paper lined up like this, and I'm going to find the second hole by putting a hole through all sheets of paper. Alrighty, it's about right there. And press that pin in deep. That's why I have aluminum pins to do this. They're actually stronger, and they also have a longer point on them than regular push pins. All right, I love them. They last forever. All right, so now I got my paper in place just like that. You'll understand what I'm doing as I do it. All right, pull the pins back out. Take the paper back off of there. All right. Now here's my block. My block's sitting in place, but my block needs to be inked up. Now I'm not going to ink the block up directly on my registration block, because if I do, I'll get ink around the edges and get ink on the border of my paper. That's a bad idea. All right, so I'm going to lay the block over here. Again, I'll lay my mat down underneath it so the block doesn't shift when I ink the block up. All right. Now, since we're printing at home, we're using non-toxic stuff to work with. All right. These are oil inks, but they're actually they're water washable. What kind of oil that Speedball is using in particular? They're using soybean oil to actually make these inks now, and that's why they sort of break down somewhat in water. In reality, you need like a vegetable oil to clean them off, or just dish detergent works well as long as it's pure dish detergent, very little water. I'll talk about cleanup in another video. All right, so I'm going to mix colors now. One thing I forgot or I didn't have for my students was a palette knife. A nice painting palette knife would work really fine, and I would show you one, but I'm right in the middle of the video right now. So if you don't have one at home, a butter knife will actually work. All right, you got to sneak it out of your parents' kitchen. Of course, your mom doesn't want you to. Make sure you wash it off good and clean after you're finished with it before you put it back in that drawer. All right, so when you open up these inks for the first time, you got to put the lid back on here. You'll see that sometimes the oil is actually separated from the color, so you want to squish it like this. Mix it up, all right, while it's still in there. And that's what I'm doing. A lot of times these oils separate from the inks in the tubes. Okay, and then you'll want to lay down a little bit of ink. All right, I'm making I can still see the oil separated a little bit. That's all right. I am making a sky blue type color for my background, all right, which is what that's going to be. So I need some white and I need some blue. Try to mix that up a little bit. Swish it up in here. Lay down. All right, it's always good to mix light to dark. All right, so you start by adding you put your white down first and you add a little bit of blue to it. Now I'm not going to put that blue directly in that white. I'm going to put it over here somewhere. All right, just because I don't want to get too much. All right, a little bit of color goes a long way when you're adding color to a white. If you want to keep it nice and subtle, you better not just put all that blue in there because it might be too dark. All right, so I take little bits at a time, and I work in small amounts because until you're sure about what color you are, you shouldn't mix up a big batch, otherwise you'll waste. And you can see I don't have very much color, only 1.25 ounces. These Speedballs, by the way, this is just their sample kit. All right, so you don't get a lot of ink, and unfortunately you don't get enough ink for a professional printmaker in general. Their larger sizes don't seem to carry the size I need as a printmaker. All right, but so I'm gradually sort of adding the blue to the white and mixing it in just like this. You sort of the standard technique is to pick it up and drop it down. I should have, hopefully, I'm sure there was probably a non-serrated butter knife would even be a little bit better than this one. So it's got edges on it, little teeth. All right, by the way, I'm mixing this on a glass pallet. Again, a glass pallet was simply made by a piece of mat board on the back with some duct tape around the edges. The duct tape's obviously to protect your fingers from getting cut as you're handling your glass pallet. All right, these are really fantastic pallets, by the way. They also last a long time, too. You don't want to use plexi. Plexi scratches too easily, and those throwaway pallets are just bad as well. You can't really ink up with a Breyer on a disposable painter's palette. There's no reason for those. Alrighty, my color is not, it's still a little light for my taste. I'm going to add more blue now. The funny thing about these inks is, well, the smell for one thing. They smell strange. They smell sort of organic in a way, like it could be soybean. They're also sort of they sort of have a matte finish to them, and they don't lay out quite the same as regular oil-based inks do. The good thing is, though, they aren't the worst for cleanup. They're actually easier to clean up than oil-based. Like I said, they're more non-toxic. I can't be 100% sure that they're non-toxic. I hadn't did my research online, but they're safe enough to use at home, and mainly because of their ease of cleanup. Now, the water-soluble inks, if you're using those, the disadvantage of water-soluble inks is that they dry kind of quickly when you're printing. All right. So I'm having a little trouble with this knife as far as mixing well, but it's okay. I'm getting it out there. All right, I really am desperately wanting to use a palette knife, which I know I have one. For the benefit of my students that may not have one, that's it. Also, I just removed a little bit of a chunk there. There was some sort of little dry chunk in my ink. Now what I'm doing is I'm setting up a well, which is actually a area just wider than the Breyer itself. All right, you want to make sure that you mix up enough ink for your entire edition. Right now, I estimate I got enough for about 3 or 4 prints. All right, I have 6 pieces of paper there, so I need to jack out some more ink. Throw that out there. I never use ink straight out of the tube as far as colors go. I always like to mix because tube colors are just, I don't know, they're just too, recognizable in a sense. It doesn't say that one has a good sense of color or color sensibility if you use it directly from the tube as much as if you mix your colors. It's sort of an amateur approach to not mix colors. I have my own color sensibility. I have my own color palette. I keep it in my head, and I break it out, and usually have these sort of standard colors, including this particular sky blue color. I use it in a lot of the works that I do. Okay, for a second, I do have to get a palette knife. All right, 1 second here. There's a big giant guy. Alrighty, so I got this big giant palette knife just because it's a little bit easier to manipulate. I can take the ink off with this. It's flexible on the end, that's what makes it a little bit better to work with. Try a plastic knife as well. If you have any brothers or sisters or brothers that have 3D printers, you could always, they usually get a palette knife with their 3D printer. Didn't we get one with our 3D pen? Not sure. Also, make sure you have some newspaper down or something to set your materials off. These palettes are not very big, so I need something down so I'm not getting ink all over the place. All right, and I have this as my ink slab. This is where I'm going to be doing my inking, and over here is where my block is. All right, so the first thing you want to do is dip into the ink once or so, just like I did, and then I'm laying it out. Now when I'm pushing forward, every time I move forward, I'm laying ink down. Every time I pull back, I'm picking ink back up with the roller. If I were to sit here and just do this, I'm laying down ink, I'm picking it back up, laying it down, picking it back up in the same place, all right? To actually blend this ink out, you need to, every so often as you're going back and forth, lift up, back and forth, lift up, back and forth, lift up, all right? And what you're doing is you're blending out the ink on the palette, and all you really need, as you can see, I only have an 8x10 palette here. All you need is this area for a 4-inch Breyer. All right, it's roughly about 4.5 by 4.5 inches. Pick up. Now, what you have here for a surface, it may be very difficult to tell in the video camera. It sort of has an orange peel surface look to it, all right? That's what you're looking for the right sort of surface to on your plate here that you're going to ink up. So when I'm going to ink up, I'm inking up a larger plate, and this certainly has a large area to cover. That's something to take in consideration. I'm pretty sure I don't have enough ink on my palette to do an entire edition of these, but I do have enough to start. All right, what I'm doing is I'm laying down the ink, and how you're doing that is this way. Once the roller goes past, it lays down ink. You'll also see that it runs out of ink halfway in the distance of the roller. Be aware of that. I'm gonna go back into my well here. Yeah, I'm going to put out more ink. The reason I only put out a little bit of ink at a time is also because I'm afraid I'll use up all my ink. That's what the sample sizes don't give you enough for more than one edition. That's why for my class we're only doing one print. If they need any more ink, you'll have to buy it from Blick Art Materials. That's where I get my ink. I could say there was a link down in the description for Blick Art Materials. Great place to buy supplies. Choices are running slim on those. Whoa. Alrighty. By the way, the song, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the song you were just listening to was called Man Machine by Kraftwerk. Yes, Man Machine, because printing makes you feel like a machine. Yep, first time you ink a plate, you have to put down a lot of ink on that plate, all right? Twice as much. After that, you've got some ink that's sort of worked into the plate itself, and it won't take as much ink to push down. By the way, I forgot I'm not really talking about what I'm doing here. As I'm laying the ink down, I'm sort of going over, and I'm really just sort of trying to cover the entire distance of this plate. If I had a larger brayer, it'd be a little easier. But since I have a smaller brayer, I have to do this way. All right, once I laid down a full bit of ink, I'm running out of ink over here, so I'm going to mix up quite a bit more. Put down some more blue, put down some more white. How do I know I have enough and I'm making the same color? I'm not 100% sure, but just from experience of mixing inks, a lot of times you figure it out. You get better at it as you do it, and I'm really a proponent for that. Just doing it, diving right into it. There we go. Look at that. That's about the same color as I had there before. A little bit on the dark side. That's all right. Okay, here we go. Back to the ink. Notice my hands are clean. As a printmaker, you try to be clean about it. If you spent a lot of time mixing up your ink and you got kind of messy while you were mixing, go wash your hands. Wash them off with soap, dishwashing soap. That'll actually take the oil-based ink out really well. Alrighty, see that? Got an orange peel surface on there. Not sure if it shows. And I'm laying down one stroke across. Now that I spread the ink out prior, I'm going to get this. Why did I not backstroke on that? Because I know if I backstroke, I'm just going to take ink back up, and I'm just trying to put ink down on this plate. Alrighty, 1, 2, 3. Now, when you develop, when you're inking up your plates, you're going to develop a system for how you're going to do this, since you're going to be doing it repeatedly, inking up the plate, making sure it's inked up properly. And then you'll know if you have even inking. Like, for example, I went 1, 2, 3, and then I went back 4, 5, like that, and then I went back across this way. So I might go that way next to make sure it's all inked up, and then that's the sort of pattern I'll do every time I go to ink the plate up. All right, I have a nice surface on here now, surface of ink. I can see that it looks like, you know, it looks fairly even all around on it, which is what you're trying to go for. And you want to see a little bit of shine off of there, a little bit of orange peel surface, just like what I had here. And that's when you know you have enough ink on your plate. I'm going to carefully take the plate up and I'm going to put it over here. Now this plate has an abstract image, so I was smart enough to mark which side was the top, and then the top is up here where I have my pin marks. So when I lay it up here, that's the way I'm going to sit it in there at all times. Alright, so I push it right up against the edge. Here's a little thing that's a little bit problematic. Either the plate isn't perfectly straight. Try not to touch yourself with that. Right there you can see that there's a little gap there. That's because this linoleum is sort of not 100% perfect. Alright, but we'll pay attention to that later when I print my second plate, and you'll find out what that does. Noticing that gap on there. Alright, so now that I have it, I'll take my first sheet of paper down. Make sure your hands are clean, and then I'm going to rest that sheet of paper directly on here like this, right in the corner. And I'm going to even find out where my pinholes are by taking the pins, right, just like that, and stick that one in right there. And then I'm going to take this one back in. Find the hole, alright, and then I make sure it stays in the hole as it goes in there. And now I'm going to just lightly apply pressure over the outside of the paper to make it stick, alright. And what I'm doing is making the ink stick down to that paper. Alright, then I take my wooden spoon and I begin to apply pressure. And you can see the spoon's a little dirty. I don't know. Yeah, there's some old ink on there or something. And also you can see the ink coming through the back side as I rub over it. So all of a sudden you see it on the back of the paper itself. This is the way you tell if something's hand printed versus press printed. All right. My pins being in the paper, by the way, are actually holding the paper in place nicely too, so you can check it. This is a technique for printing, just small, tight little balls, rubbing all over. This is what Gauguin used to do back in the 1800s. This is how he printed his plates. He didn't have a press. He wasn't a printmaker. He was a painter. They liked to do these things. I think he started making them when he lived in the islands. He certainly didn't have a printing press. Make sure you're applying pressure over the entire surface. If you miss any areas, they won't be printed very well. Now, the reason you have oil-based ink is so you can take breaks from this. And it won't dry out while it's sitting here, because this is working it. You get carpal tunnel syndrome from doing this too much when you get older. But I like good printings. Alright, I can see that pattern coming through really nicely. And then you can check it. You can check your work while you're printing, while you're applying pressure, and make sure you got everything. There's a few places I missed right there. A little spotty right there in some areas. Right there. Right here. Right down in there. Right along there. I felt like there was something down there missing. Oh, I missed that spot. Yeah, not too shabby. This is my atmospheric print. This is my background. So I'm not too worried about it being a little bit irregular. Also, that's also how you recognize a hand-printed relief print as opposed to a one that's printed with a press as well. So there we go. That's my first print. All right. Yeah. That's it. I'll show you how to clean up in another video. Meanwhile, I got to keep printing. I've got a lot of work to do. All right, so I'll see you later.